Okay, thank you all for coming. My name is Paul Spiegel. I am a
thanks.
longevity advocate, member of the
I
board of
have my own.
directors of the Life Extension Advocacy Foundation, and proud to be friends with these three gentlemen here. We're going to be doing a short panel discussion. I think that most of you expect that you're going to die. So far, at least, everybody is going to at some point or another. There are lots of ways to do that. Now, how many of you have always been told that the good way to die is to die of old age? Better than cancer, better than being run over by a truck, anything like that. Yeah, old age is apparently the way it's supposed to be. And in the last few years, we've started to think about that and ask ourselves, why? Why does this have to be the good way to go? Why does it have to be the way to go at all? Well, until very recently, nobody has been able to really make a good frontal assault on the idea that old age is going to get us all. But in the last 15 years or so, 20 years, science has been looking at this very carefully and very hard, and they're beginning to come to the conclusion that we can actually do something about old age. We can push it off, we can hold it, we can stop it in its tracks, and increasingly, as you just heard Dr. Kohanski say, we might be able to reverse it. Now, this is a fairly radical concept for a lot of people. But is there anybody in here that wants to die of old age? Okay, I don't see any hands. I'll give somebody $20 and say, yeah, I want to die. No, I don't think that's the case. Now, it is the human endeavor to try and push off disaster as long as possible. And in fact, mankind has been doing this for thousands of years. The invention of fire increased the human lifespan. The idea that you should wash your hands before you deliver children increased the human lifespan. The concept of public sanitation, the idea that it was a bad idea to drink out of your sewer, increased the human lifespan. And what we're going to examine, what we are examining now, is what science is doing right now to make your lives longer and better. And in that context, I'd like to introduce my panel. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves because you know more about yourselves than I do. But just to give you a brief overview, I've got Steve Garan here. He's from academia. I've got Ron Kohanski, who is from government, and I've got Stephen Hilbert here, who is from industry. So we've got the spread, and I'll leave it to you guys to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Steve Garan. I'm at UC Berkeley Center for Research and Education on Aging, and I'm Director of Bioinformatics there.
I'm Ron Kohanski. I'm still from the NIH.
Nothing changed. I'm Stephen Hilbert, and I'm Chief Business Officer for a company called Oisin, Biotechnologies, and OncoSenX, which is our first-in-man cancer company. We have a new technology that delivers a lipid nanoparticle, and inside that lipid nanoparticle, we put DNA that goes after cells that are senescent.
Great. Thank you, guys. This is kind of fun. I get to hang out on stage with my friends and shoot the breeze, and hopefully we can all learn something. I've got a few questions here in no particular order. I guess the first one is, if you guys could give us your opinion, how far have things come in the last 10 or 15 years?
I can respond to that first. Actually, quite significantly moved forward because, as my colleague recognized, talking about extending life and slowing down the aging process was thought to be rather out there a few decades ago. It was not viewed as a practical medical pursuit or anything to do with biotechnology, but now it's definitely, I'm not going to say mainstream, but it's certainly coming mainstream now. And there's a lot of companies, a lot of academic institutions, and obviously the government through the National Institutes of Aging is definitely looking at this in a serious way. And it definitely makes, how can I put this, it's very relevant to us here living in probably one of the most beautiful places in the world, California, and specifically Northern California. It definitely, living longer is far more appealing than maybe in some other place in the world. So we're very blessed to be here, and I think a lot of people here in the Bay Area are looking into that and trying to make our lives longer and better.
35 years ago, the National Institute on Aging did not exist. It was part of the National Institutes of Child Health. Aging was actually considered what happens when a child grows up, for those who do. And we became a separate institute, but it wasn't clear what was meant by aging, and since we declined to define it, it was pretty hard to attract a clientele of researchers. So about 25 years ago, we started a program on longevity assurance genes. The concept being that a large component of aging would be inherited. And you know this if you look at families of centenarians, the children are often quite long-lived. Through 3 cycles or 15 years of funding, we found over 400 longevity assurance genes. And what we're doing now is finding out how they interact, and we're also finding out how they vary from in different species that have different lifespans but come from the same evolutionary clade. So things have come quite a long way. We have added now to the questions of lifespan, we've added the questions of health span. Key concept being, or the 2 key concepts being, if you are healthier, you will probably live longer. And if you are going to live longer, you would like to be healthier. It's 2 sides of the same coin, what we call the compression of morbidity. So you don't want to have long period of disability and discomfort. We'd like to shorten that.
Well, from industry perspective, I'm relatively new to it. I'm a banker by trade, but I've been in biotech advising for over 10 years. And from where I sit, I think we are sort of that, the word singularity has been brought up quite a bit today, or from companies' perspective, I think we're going to see a dramatic shift in how we treat medicine in the next 10 years. The technology is finally here. As I alluded to, OncoSenX, our first-in-man cancer company, will be treating cancer tumors at the cellular level. So the side effects potentially being longer life in other areas of your bodies and precancerous cells that we hit. So it's a whole new world out there. I think with genetic therapies and DNA, the human genome being mapped, I think you're going to see a lot of companies behind us focusing on gene therapies and more personalized medicine going forward.
Excellent, thank you. I guess a big question that a lot of people have, I would guess many of you think this way, it's hard to imagine aging as a disease, something that we can address, something that we can treat, something that perhaps we can cure. Do you guys see significant pushback to the idea that aging is something we can address like the flu or cancer or anything like that?
Yeah, I think still out there in the vast public, I think aging is something that just happens, like the sun comes up every morning. There's not much you can do about it. But obviously, if you understand biology well enough, it's a process that happens to every organism in the world. And obviously, the rate is different. Obviously, my dog is going to live for about 15, 16 years, or there's rats that live for 3 years, and mine's 2 years. Average life for human beings is about 70, 80 years, depending on what country you live in. But so it's definitely programmed, and your lifespan is really determined on what kind of organism you are. And so if that's the case, which actually it is the case, there's something that can be done, because if these organisms all have different lifespans, there's something controlling those lifespans. And if you can find out what that control mechanism is, you can certainly intervene and extend the process. And that's sort of in a nutshell. So I think if you explain this very very briefly to kind of a layman, I think they'd understand that. So I think more and more people are aware of that. Yeah.
So I agree with that analysis. On the question more directly of whether aging is a disease, there's no regulatory body that looks at it that way. The World Health Organization does not identify it as a disease. The Food and Drug Administration does not. The National Institutes of Health does not. And I know the American Medical Association does not. So I don't know about every medical association in every country, but the leadership usually comes from the U.S. on these things. So at the moment, it's something that happens. I would say it's more like the sun setting every day. I'm a pessimist.
Yeah, that's true. We started our company as a long aging company, Oisin Biotechnologies, with the intent of increasing health span and lifespan by killing these senescent cells, and quickly came to that conclusion. You can't really go after aging. There's just no FDA-approved drug for that at this point. So you have to find pathologies of aging, and it turns out our product was really good at destroying solid cancer tumors. So, well, that is something we can go after. So I think for industry folks that are looking to find ways to tackle aging, we really right now need to work within the guidelines that we have, which are the rules that the FDA has set. And until they change those rules to say that aging is indeed a disease, let's find ways to cure and go after age-related disease within that compound to maybe have those side effects. And over time, maybe the administrations and the powers that be will change their tune. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, I would just add one small gloss to that. Even if the FDA or any other regulatory body does not label aging as a disease, for FDA purposes, their keys are to have markers of aging so that you can say this has had an impact on aging as opposed to a selected disease.
So, as you can see, there is still some discussion. Is aging a disease, or is it just a collection of pathologies, each one of which might be understood to be a disease? Given that there's still some disagreement, very valid disagreement on the subject, what do you think are the major bottlenecks to translating therapies that target the hallmarks of aging, and how do we overcome these?
Well, I think aging is a little like economics. If you ask 10 economists about this certain other case state in the economy, they'll give you 11 opinions. And I think the same thing is true for people that study aging. You talk to 10 aging biologists, and they'll give you 11 reasons why we grow old, and they're all different. So I think right now there's still not a real good consensus as to what the process is or what it looks like, and also how to deal with it. So I think that's sort of that's a problem. But I think as time goes forward and we understand more about the process, I think things will coalesce and we'll have a better idea of what it is and what to do about it.
I agree with that. I think that it's an opportunity, and emerging in biology of aging research would be artificial intelligence. Maybe it's just so complicated and complex that it's a learning process, and it's not clear if you focus on one or a subset of things in the network that you'll have adequate insight. We do have the opinion that the hallmarks of aging interact with each other, and that they interact with genes that are underlying or alleles of genes that underlie adult onset diseases. So the aging of the body in the presence of a disease-causing allele will at some point interact. But it's complex, so there's going to be some options to figure out how that happens.
I just want to add to what Ron said. In fact, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is the most complex biological process that takes place. It's not like AIDS or Alzheimer's or any other disease where those are relatively well categorized and classified, whereas when you grow old, everything in your body grows old. But at different rates, in fact, but nonetheless. So it's a very large target, and it's difficult to deal with. But I'm not sure if you alluded to artificial intelligence, but certainly when we have better tools to understand the data set, and I am in bioinformatics, and so it's a very big data set. I think bioinformatics and obviously better tools for dealing with that data will be very beneficial.
Yeah, we're really focused on one aspect of the aging as of right now, which is targeting those senescent cells. And what we found in our mouse studies is significant increases in health span of those mice if we eliminate those senescent cells. So just by doing that alone, I think we could have a larger increase in health span by a significant margin. But you're right, their pathologies of aging are numerous, and there's a ton of other companies looking at not just that, but how do you extend telomeres, or how do you look at other areas of aging and keep those pathologies at bay. It is super complex, but that means more companies and more investment down the road, I would imagine.
And there's going to be more than just one attack. In other words, it's going to be multi-phased. I think all of us have heard of hormone replacement therapy. In fact, my wife is taking progesterone right now, and so there are benefits to that. So I think there's going to be multiple things that will take place in order to slow down this process, not just one.
If I could add a last point, one of the impediments is that the nature of the grant cycle, which is anywhere from 2 to 5 years, pushes investigators to either use short-lived organisms, which they then might age out, or to use organisms that are closer to humans, but to intervene earlier. So, or to test their ideas in young animals. But there's a thing called the geroscience point of view, which is how biology of aging interacts with biology of disease. that if you study the disease of aging in a young animal, you pick the wrong organism. If you study it in an old animal, you may still have the wrong organism, but you're one step closer to finding out what it is about aging that contributes to that disease.
Do you see a benefit for biomarkers? I mean,
Yes.
it's a big question, I know, but
Yes.
rather than waiting for an animal to die, there are things we can look at and say, hey, they're doing better.
Yeah, I think one of the things that are not very well appreciated is that aging is, how can I put it? So the trajectory of an animal doesn't stop with aging. In other words, it's a whole process, it's development that goes into kind of decline. So if you look at an arrow shot in up in the air, aging is when it basically peaks and starts to go down. But the person that shot the arrow into the air basically defines the entire trajectory, the upwards and downwards trajectory. And so aging is basically just a continuation of the whole life process. So there's nothing really different. In fact, there is a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which basically drives both those processes. So we kind of understand that there is a controller that kind of controls this whole pathway, especially in higher organisms.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I like the analogy.
By the way, I have to thank my friend Lee McCook for giving me that. I take no credit for that. But it's a very visual type of an instrument. I think all of us can understand that. So.
Okay, we're running a little short on time here, so I'm going to compress this question. If you could each give me your own opinion on what you think is the most important advance in longevity that we are likely to see in the next, say, 10 years, 5 to 10 years, just quickly.
Right, and I think there's two things, and I think it's going to be really definitely game changers. Our friends in China are going to come online and do some amazing things. I thank you for all the efforts that you're making there. And number two, again, artificial intelligence is definitely going to be a game changer as well. It's going to imagine having 10,000 or 100,000 PhDs at your fingertips. It's definitely going to make things different. And also, basically, those PhDs are basically looking at the internet 24 hours a day.
I would be inclined to say that if we understand the complexity of rejuvenation, we'll have a pretty good handle on how to deal with multiple aspects of aging.
And from where I sit, I think you're going to see a lot more companies involved in DNA and lipid nanoparticle sequences at the cellular level, treating age-related diseases through that.
Excellent. Okay, another quick question. I can see that we're moving on here. Besides yourselves, could you each give me one name that you would say would be a person to watch in this field?
You know, I don't think there's a single person because it's going to be a bunch of people just putting this whole puzzle together. But what I would like to say, though, there are people out there that will not live long enough to be there for a cure. So, in fact, there is a lifeboat out there I just want to mention. There's a technique called cryopreservation where you can freeze yourself and ride out this technological gap that we're going to paint here. So if I were to be asked a question, how long do you think it will be before we understand this aging process? I think definitely the AI will be huge, and I think if you take that, and again, the folks in China coming online with all their talent and efforts, I'm thinking within about 25 to 30 years we'll have a really good idea of that. Yeah.
I have an answer for the one person I would like to look at, but given my position in determining funding, I can't actually say her name, but you know her. But there are people who are prominent in that they train the next generation of researchers, and these are the people who will have the unhindered ideas that will move fields forward.
Excellent.
I can't, there's so many that I can think of, but if we look at the Methuselah Foundation, which gives a lot of money to these types of companies, there's quite a few there, and the SENS Foundation, Aubrey de Grey's group, I think you'll see a lot more companies and a lot more names in the near future.
Excellent. Okay, I know that we're out of time here. I had one more question very, very quickly. What do each of you guys do to enhance your lifespan? Some people say nothing. That's okay.
I think it's super important to be happy. If you're happy and you have a good life, I think the rest kind of takes care of itself. And it's one of the reasons why I moved to California. I'm originally from Canada, where we have some of the worst weather in the world. And so never underestimate the power of being happy.
I build furniture, and if you are not calm, you can't do it. So it's taught me a lot about being calm, something I'm not accustomed to in all circumstances.
Understood.
I come to things like this and get to hang out with you, Paul, so as that. And no, not to round, no. I think just intermittent fasting in the morning sometimes and working out and staying healthy and keeping that smile on, I would agree. Being happy is key.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Are you reading Convoy?
Calm.
Yeah, you're the convoy. Thank you.